Let me ask you something genuinely weird. What if the most financially successful people you've ever met are secretly miserable? And what if the person driving a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a cracked bumper is actually sleeping better than your neighbour with the Tesla in the driveway? That's not a motivational poster. That's not some hippie nonsense about money not buying happiness. That's a real, documented psychological and financial phenomenon. And once you understand it, the way you think about your own money will never be the same. Today, we're talking about the difference between being rich and feeling rich. And I promise you, by the end of this video, one of those two things is going to matter a whole lot less to you than it did when you clicked play. Because most people spend their entire lives optimizing for the wrong one. Here's the problem, and it's one that almost nobody in the personal finance space wants to say out loud because it's uncomfortable. We've been sold a single narrative. Accumulate more, earn more, save more, invest more, and eventually, at some magical future point, you will arrive. You will feel like you made it. You will feel secure. You will feel free. But here's what actually happens. People double their income and feel exactly the same within 6 months. People hit their number, their retirement goal, their net worth milestone, their savings target, and feel a hollow kind of nothing. They look around and think, is this it? Did I do the math wrong? This is not a failure of ambition. This is not ingratitude. This is a well-documented gap between your balance sheet and your nervous system. And most financial advice has absolutely no idea what to do with it. The financial industry is very good at telling you how to be rich. It is almost completely silent on how to feel rich. And that silence is costing people not just happiness, but actual money. Because when you don't understand why you feel broke despite having money, you make terrible financial decisions trying to fix that feeling. You overspend, you chase, you compare, you upgrade your lifestyle in ways that feel like progress but actually move the finish line even further. So let's get into what this actually looks like in real life, because this isn't abstract theory. This plays out in very specific, very recognizable ways. The first example is someone we're going to call Marcus. Marcus is 38. He makes $280,000 a year. His household income puts him in the top 4% of earners in the United States. By almost every statistical definition, Marcus is wealthy. But Marcus grew up watching his parents stress about money every single month. He remembers the conversations about whether there was enough for the electric bill. He remembers the anxiety in the kitchen. And here's the thing about money anxiety. It doesn't just live in your bank account. It lives in your body. It becomes a default emotional setting that your nervous system runs on autopilot, completely independent of what's actually in your checking account. So Marcus earns $280,000, has a healthy investment portfolio, a paid-off car, and an emergency fund, and still checks his bank account 3 times a day with a low-grade sense of dread. Still hesitates before a $60 dinner. Still feels a flash of shame when he buys something for himself that isn't strictly necessary. He'll stand in a store holding something he can absolutely afford and put it back. Not because of the math, because of something much older than the math. He is rich. He does not feel rich. And the gap between those two things has nothing to do with the numbers, and everything to do with the story that got written in his brain before he ever earned a dollar. The uncomfortable question you have to ask yourself: how much of your relationship with money is actually about your current financial reality? And how much is a script that was written for you before you were old enough to read it? Because that script runs in the background every single day. And until you identify it, it runs the show. Now let's talk about the opposite. Let's talk about someone who feels rich, actually feels it in their bones, on a modest income. Priya is 34. She earns $67,000 a year as a graphic designer in a mid-sized city. She rents. She doesn't own a car. She has about $28,000 in savings and a small Roth IRA. She contributes $200 to every month. By net worth standards, she is decidedly not rich. A financial spreadsheet would look at Priya's situation and raise an eyebrow. A standard personal finance checklist would flag multiple boxes as unchecked. No house, no car, savings that wouldn't impress anyone at a dinner party. But here's what Priya did differently. About 4 years ago, she sat down and got brutally honest about what actually made her feel financially secure. Not what she was supposed to want, not what Instagram suggested she should want, but what genuinely moved the needle on her sense of peace. The answer surprised her. She didn't need a house. She didn't need a car. She didn't even need a 6-figure savings account. What she needed was a buffer, specifically 3 months of expenses in a dedicated account she never touched, and the ability to say no to work she didn't want without panicking. That was it. That was her personal definition of feeling financially free. 2 things, not 20. So she built exactly that. She automated the buffer. She structured her freelance income to give her that flexibility. She stopped spending money on things that looked like wealth. Eating out every night, a gym membership she hated, subscription boxes she forgot she had. And redirected that money into the 2 things that actually gave her the feeling she was chasing. Priya is not rich. But Priya feels richer than Marcus most days of the week. She wakes up on a Tuesday and can turn down a client she doesn't want to work with. That is a specific kind of freedom that Marcus, for all his income and portfolio value, does not feel. And here's the punchline. That feeling makes her financial decisions dramatically better over time, because she is not making decisions from anxiety. She is making them from clarity. The third example is the one that's going to make a lot of people uncomfortable, because it's about a mistake that is extremely common among people who are smart about money, people who read the books, people who did everything right. Daniel is 45. He is by most measures genuinely wealthy. He has a net worth north of $2.4 million. He maxes out his 401k every single year without fail. He has a diversified investment portfolio that any advisor would be proud of. He paid off his house last year. He reads personal finance blogs. He listens to podcasts. He tracks his net worth monthly in a spreadsheet he has maintained for 11 years. He could probably host his own show about financial independence. And Daniel is chronically, structurally, pathologically unable to spend money on himself. Not because he doesn't have it, not because he doesn't intellectually know he could afford things, but because somewhere along the way, Daniel conflated accumulation with virtue. He made the number going up his entire identity. He optimized so hard for building wealth that he completely forgot to build a life that the wealth was supposed to fund. This is more common than people admit, and here's what's insidious about it. It looks like discipline from the outside. His friends admire him. His financial advisor congratulates him. Nobody sees the problem because the problem isn't visible on any spreadsheet. There is no line item for hasn't taken a vacation in 4 years. The problem is that Daniel is hoarding money the way some people hoard physical objects. Not because it serves any functional purpose, but because the act of accumulation itself has become a way to manage anxiety. And no amount of accumulation ever permanently resolves anxiety. It just raises the bar. The number that felt like enough at $500,000 no longer feels like enough at $2.4 million. It never will. Daniel is rich. Daniel has never, not for a single afternoon, felt rich. And the saddest part? The money he has worked so hard to accumulate is largely going to outlive his desire to use it, because the habit of deprivation, once it calcifies, doesn't just dissolve when the number gets big enough. So what's actually going on here? Why does this gap exist between the objective financial reality and the subjective financial experience? Why can't the brain just look at the account balance and update its emotional state accordingly? There are a few mechanisms worth understanding, because naming them is the first step to doing something about them. The first is hedonic adaptation, the brain's relentless tendency to normalize whatever it has. You get a raise? Within months, that new income level is your floor, not your ceiling. You buy the nicer apartment. Within weeks, it just feels like your apartment. The pleasure fades. The baseline shifts upward, and now you need more to feel the same level of satisfaction you felt before. This isn't a character flaw. This is biology. Your brain is conserving energy by deciding that the new normal doesn't require a celebration response. The second mechanism is social comparison. And I don't mean just scrolling Instagram and feeling bad, although yes, that too. I mean the deeply unconscious automatic process by which your brain is constantly benchmarking your financial situation against the people around you. Research consistently shows that people's satisfaction with their income depends less on the absolute number and more on how it compares to their reference group. A $100,000 salary feels completely different in rural Kansas than it does in San Francisco. Not because the money buys dramatically different things, but because your brain is doing math you didn't ask it to do, comparing your number to everyone else's numbers and generating a feeling accordingly. The third mechanism is what psychologists call your financial set point. A baseline level of financial security or insecurity that was largely established in childhood and that reasserts itself regardless of what actually happens to your income. This is Marcus's story. This is the reason why lottery winners return to roughly their previous baseline happiness within 2 years of winning. This is the reason why people who grew up wealthy often feel more financially secure on $60,000 than people who grew up poor feel on $200,000. The thermostat was calibrated early, and it takes deliberate, sustained effort to recalibrate it. Just earning more doesn't do it. The thermostat doesn't update automatically. Now here is where most finance videos would give you a list of 5 tips and send you on your way. We're not doing that. Instead, let's talk about a framework, a genuine way of thinking about this, that you can actually apply to your own situation. The solution to the gap between being rich and feeling rich is not to earn more. It is not to save more. It is not to optimize your portfolio. Those things matter, and you should do them, but they are not the answer to this specific problem. The answer has 2 parts, and they have to happen in order. Part 1. Figure out what feeling rich actually means for you, not in the abstract, not based on what the personal finance content you consume has told you it should mean, but in your own specific life, with your own specific psychology, values, and history. This sounds obvious. It is almost never done. Most people are chasing a feeling they've never clearly defined. They're running towards something without a picture of what it looks like. So they just keep running. They upgrade the car and wait for the feeling. It doesn't come. They hit the net worth milestone and wait. It still doesn't come. Because the feeling they are chasing was never attached to those specific things in the first place. Here's an exercise that is deceptively simple and genuinely useful. Think about the last 3 times you felt financially at ease, genuinely calm and secure and not anxious about money? What were the actual conditions? Not the number in your account, but the conditions of your life. Were you on vacation? Were you debt-free? Had you just paid off something? Were you in a period of low expenses? Were you doing work you chose freely? Were you spending money on something that mattered to you instead of something you felt you were supposed to want? Write down what was actually true about those moments. The feeling you're chasing has a shape. Find the shape, because you can often engineer the feeling with far fewer resources than you think, once you stop trying to engineer it with the wrong variables. Priya found her shape, a buffer and the freedom to say no. It's a small shape. She built it on $67,000 a year. The shape of your enough is probably not as expensive as you fear. Part 2 is about your nervous system, not your spreadsheet. And I know that sounds like therapy speak, but stay with me for a second because this is practical. If your baseline emotional setting around money was calibrated in a period of genuine scarcity, childhood poverty, financial trauma, a period in adulthood where things were genuinely bad, then the work of closing the gap between being rich and feeling rich requires directly addressing that baseline, not just adding more money to the pile. This can look like therapy focused on money beliefs. It can look like deliberately practicing proof gathering, consciously noting the evidence that you are financially safe, because your anxious brain has a strong negative bias and actively discounts positive evidence. It can look like scheduled, non-negotiable spending on things that represent the life your wealth is supposed to fund. Because giving yourself permission to actually use money is a skill that atrophies badly in people who are wired to save. The goal is alignment. The goal is a life where what your balance sheet says and what your body believes are telling roughly the same story. Not perfect harmony, that may not be achievable and probably isn't necessary, but rough alignment. Enough that you can make a financial decision without your nervous system overriding your rational judgment. That alignment is not automatic. It doesn't happen just because the number gets big enough. It has to be built deliberately, just like the wealth itself. Two parallel construction projects. Most people only build one of them. Let's recap this quickly because I want it to be sticky. Being rich is a number. Feeling rich is an experience. And those two things are far more independent of each other than anyone in the financial industry wants to admit. Because the industry makes money selling you the idea that one automatically produces the other. It doesn't. That's the whole point of this video. The gap is real, it's documented, and it has three main drivers: hedonic adaptation, social comparison, and your financial set point. That baseline emotional calibration that was largely written before you were an adult. The solution is not more accumulation. The solution is first defining, clearly, specifically, personally, what the feeling you're actually chasing looks like. And second, doing the deliberate work to close the gap between your financial reality and your body's experience of that reality. Marcus needs to do the work of separating his present financial reality from his childhood nervous system. The ledger and the body have to be introduced to each other and brought into the same conversation. Priya already figured out her actual shape of enough and built exactly that, efficiently, specifically, without wasting resources chasing things that weren't actually connected to the feeling she wanted. Daniel needs to give himself permission to actually live inside the wealth he spent 2 decades building. The money did its job. Now he has to let it. And you need to decide which of these 3 stories is closest to yours. Because the action that follows is different for each one. Here's your action step. And it's one thing, not 5. This week, before you check your investment accounts or open a budgeting app or do any of the normal financial stuff you do, spend 20 minutes writing down 3 specific concrete conditions that would make you feel financially secure. Not a number, not a net worth. Conditions. What would your day look like? What would your choices feel like? What would no longer stress you out? What would you stop checking, stop worrying about, stop calculating in your head at 2 a.m.? If you don't know what you're building toward, every dollar you save is just a number. Give the number a shape. Do that before you do anything else this week. If this video made you think differently about your own relationship with money, hit subscribe. I put out content every week that goes deeper than the usual personal finance stuff. And if you want to see more videos on the psychology of money, not just the mechanics, let me know in the comments. And speaking of the comments, I want to know which of the 3 examples in this video felt most like you. The high earner who still feels broke, the modest earner who's figured out her enough, or the wealth accumulator who's forgotten how to spend? Drop it below. I read every single one, and honestly, the answers are going to be fascinating. Because here's what I know from making this kind of content. The financial question nobody asks out loud is almost always the one that matters most. And the fact that you're watching a video about the difference between being rich and feeling rich tells me you're already asking the right questions. See you next week.